Hi, I'm Andrew Spieler,
And I'm Mary Hope Rennie.
and you're watching or listening to Behind the Sign, real stories from real estate. Mary Hope, there's somebody sitting next to me who's kind of a big deal here.
We have the honor and privilege to have Bill Weidacher here with us.
Yes.
Bill is
Hello, everybody.
Yes, he is the operating partner of Keller Williams Metropolitan. He's also one of the owners and founders of Keller Williams. And as I think we've even mentioned, in March we turned 20 years old, right? Is that?
Yeah, it's hard to believe that that's 20 years ago, but yeah.
Yeah. And your history doesn't start 20 years ago, am I right?
It starts this month, 1983. So February of 1983 is when I sat for the real estate exam, passed the test, and then got into the business full time.
Okay, so you're about 3 years old,
So
I think.
that's 42 years of doing it.
Yeah.
I'll let everybody do the math.
Yeah.
It's 42 years of doing it, and I was 21 at the time. So I'm about to turn 63 because
You didn't let them do the math.
on my 21st birthday is when I sat for the exam. So
On your birthday?
on my 21st
Oh,
birthday,
man.
I sat for the
Now,
test.
the real question is, did you pass it in the first go?
I did.
So you got the celebrate afterwards.
But to be fair, years later, when I took the brokerage exam, I did not. So I didn't pass
Oh.
the first time on the brokerage exam.
And I'm assuming back it was still state and national exam, right? You had to do both.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, and back then, when I sat for the brokerage exam and didn't pass, you didn't get a pass on the part that you passed.
Oh, you had to do both.
You had to take them both over again.
Oh,
And so there were these tales of people passing the national and failing the state, and then passing the state, failing the national. And I made sure that wasn't going to happen. I studied my rear end off.
Yeah.
Leave it at that. Yeah.
what got you into real estate, and why did you
So
decide to do
I'll
that?
go through it very quickly. I went to college. I was a Johnson & Wales University culinary student and started working in the restaurant business and realized pretty quickly that I didn't want to continue in the restaurant business. I like to cook. I like to entertain. But the restaurant business is a lot more than that. And the nights and weekends part exists in the real estate business also,
Yeah.
but it's a different for those that are listening or watching and have worked in the business. You know that the nights and weekends are far different in the restaurant or hotel or service industries than it is in real estate. And so I got into the business because I wanted a different way of life for myself in the future. At 21, you're thinking, what's this going to be when I'm an older person, like in my 30s?
Yes.
And I knew that I wanted to have I wanted to have the weekends after 5 o'clock to myself.
In the winters when
Yeah.
it's dark out.
So anyway, that's how it sort of started.
Okay.
My 41, 42 years of doing this has been predominantly residential. And I can't say that I ever had a regret. There's been times where the business has been hard, but not regretful. Not where you go, I wish I'd never done this. I have no regrets at all. I think it's a great business. I think it is, from my perspective, I don't know of a better one.
Mm-hmm. How did you make money in the beginning? You were 21 years old. You probably most of your counterparts weren't buying and selling houses yet.
Well, that's really interesting because I did have a conversation with the broker that hired me, and I said, I'm 21.
Right.
All of my friends, because I lived in the area and I grew up my teenage years in the area, I said, all my friends are my age. They're not buying or selling homes.
Right.
And his answer was they have parents that will, they have older brothers and sisters, they have aunts and uncles, and you're going to do things to put you in front of people that you don't know. And so I thought of it that way when I said there's people that I don't know and there's people that I do know. And so I had to get myself in front of a lot of people that I didn't know at the time. So how did I make money? I did open houses. I did opportunity time. I canvassed neighborhoods, meaning I knocked doors in neighborhoods in and around open houses, in and around homes that had sold.
Mm-hmm.
And it was looking for people that were thinking of selling. I called for sale by owners. I called expired listings. So I did all. Does any of this ring a bell?
Well,
Right?
it hasn't changed
No, it
in
hasn't.
42 years.
The technology has helped us
Yes.
because, back then you had to wait for a weekly printout of the expired listings. So some of the listings that had
Yeah.
expired were a week old.
Yeah.
And some of them had expired that day, but there was no technology to speak of.
Yes.
The technology that the organization possessed and that we needed, it was a copy machine, an IBM Selectric typewriter to type contracts,
The contracts.
and then and then what we required for in the field technology was a rolling tape measure, a computer.
A car.
Not a computer, a calculator,
Calculator.
a car,
Yeah.
and a Polaroid camera. Because back then you had to turn in one black and white photograph of the listing you just took of the exterior of the house. That's it.
Wow. Wow.
We make our business so much more complicated. We have so much technology that should be actually taking things off of our plate.
Well, with every gift comes a curse.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's ups and downs with
Right.
all of it,
Well-
'cause now you have to do all these extra things as if you don't.
Right.
It seems like you're not doing your job, versus you didn't even need to think about it back then, right?
Well, sure. And I think the agents that were successful then would be successful today.
Yes.
What I mean by that is they were willing to go the extra mile then. And the extra mile then, yes, that's different. That would be probably minimum standard today.
Yeah.
But the extra mile then was really a course in human understanding, because there were a lot of agents that were like, let me just get in my car, I'll show you houses until you buy or die, kind of a thing.
Ride or buy or die.
Yeah. So today it's sort of like, let me understand where you are in your process. What are you thinking about? What do you like? It was much more, it is now much more consultative, but those that did it well then would do it well today.
Yeah.
They'd employ the technologies because they wanted to succeed at the very highest level then also.
Yeah. So here's a question for you. I know this is kind of looking back and also sort of jumping ahead to, starting the brokerage. When you started out, did you have a mentor who kind of took you through and guided you and gave you the support you needed? And then was that something that, when you were talking about forming Metro, was something that like you wanted to have in place from the get-go, the training, the systems, the education, the support for anybody getting into the field that either you had or didn't have access to when you first started?
Yeah. So, again, it's 4 decades ago, but the difference then was the training and education was not provided at the office level. There was some, I don't want to misspeak. There was some very rudimentary training, enough to get you a little bit of information. But the bulk of it was what I learned through others. So in other words, I did a lot of audio training, meaning I bought cassettes.
Yes.
And I listened to them in my car. I also traveled for training. So when there were regional speakers or designation courses, I took them because I've always believed one of the very earliest audio training courses I took is that your capacity to earn is equal to your capacity to learn. And so I knew that if I didn't learn at the very highest level, that I wasn't gonna be there. And I felt like it was table stakes to be the highest paid professional, and the highest in terms of success levels was to know what you needed to know beyond the most basic rudimentary. Because I thought, if you know the average amount of things, you're going to be an average real estate agent producing average results for your clients. And my feeling is if you want to provide above average results for the clients, you've got to be highly educated. So to take that forward, 20 years ago, when we decided what is the invention of Keller Williams Realty Metropolitan going to look like, we said then we're going to provide education in the market center. You can look at our training calendar. There's something going on just about every day.
Every day.
Just about every day in this market center, 5 days a week, 5 of the business days of the week. And the weekends, we leave to the agents to work with their clients, do open houses and those kind of things. But we are in here. And so people can plug and play, not just as brand new agents, but experienced agents. I attended a class last week. Now I've been at this for 43 years. You go, what do you need? I need to know what I don't know.
Right.
I need to be able to hear from others that are at a much different level than I am in terms of technology. There's always something to know.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
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 Well, I think hearing you talk about when you first said, "How do I get my business?" and it was the same exact things. And so in one way, it's a boring industry because we're doing the same thing. And yet, from what you said, when you said, if you do average, you're going to be the average agent, it's how you do every one of those things.
Mhm.
And the expectation for yourself of what you expect, right? And it's not just a plug and play because you have to be the best possible version of that to be successful in this business.
Yeah.
One of
Yeah.
the tenets I've always I've said over the years, because I've been in the management side since the early 1990s. So
Okay.
after about 10 years in the business, grizzled, senior veteran at 10 years in. And keep in mind, at that point, I'm 31 years old. But one of the things that I said over the decades now is learn a little, do a little, learn a little, do a little, because learning a lot while doing nothing isn't going to get you there.
Yeah. You need the field to reinforce what you'll learn in the class.
Right.
No doubt about it.
Yeah.
And then also, Andrew, I believe this is so important. As you're doing a real estate transaction with clients, if something comes up and you think that it's coming up because of your newness, well, that may be, but something comes up in my day-to-day practice that I've never seen before also. And one of the most important things you can do, whether you're in the business of 43 minutes or 43 years, is to say, you know what, I'm not sure.
Wow.
Let me talk to some of my colleagues and let me get the right answer and get back to you, right?
Yeah.
Mm.
Because what happens is people that are new in the industry think, I need to give them an answer. No, they don't want an answer. They want the answer.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And there is a difference between them. And so I feel the more quickly you come to that realization as a new agent that you say, I know what I know and I know what I don't know.
Yeah.
And I know the difference between the two,
Mm.
the better you're going to be, the better the professional you're going to be. Learn a little, do a little, learn a little, do a little. Before you know it, you've learned a lot and you've done a lot.
Right. And knowing that there's always going to be something you're going to learn. I think that's where agents hit a ceiling when they think they've figured it out, right? I think we talk about entrepreneur to purposeful. When you realize that there's only so far you can go alone, and you're humble enough to ask when you don't know. I think that's where kind of things start separating between professionals.
Well, I forget the exact wording of that quote, but it's something along the lines of, the wise person is not the one who has all the answers. It's the one who asks all the right questions, and
Sure.
that at the end of the day,
Sure.
you prove your worth and your value as a professional by, again, knowing which questions to ask and knowing which answers you don't have the answers to yet,
Yep.
and being okay with that, because I think a lot of people get, fear, out of the film industry, right? Fear is a very dominant thing that shows up on set. And it's because people feel like they need to know everything. And if they don't, they're going to get called out on it. And they're going to get in trouble for it. And it's the same thing. I think it's just, anxiety and fear that can kind of get the better of us instead of taking a pause and saying what you're saying, which is, let me get back to you. Let me figure it out first.
Yeah, the great interviewer and who had a television show on CNN, but was also in the radio business before that, Larry King, said, I never learned anything new by speaking, only by listening.
Yeah.
And listening comes from trying to understand where people are coming from, but asking the right questions, to your point.
Yeah.
And surrounding yourself with people you trust,
Amen.
right? I think that's
100%.
important because if the people around you don't trust, you're not going to go to them, which I think is so important in this industry. We all own our own businesses, and we've been talking to a lot of agents on this podcast and how different each of our businesses. We don't all work for Keller Williams.
Yeah.
Well, think of it this way. If you were going to, you're going to replace the roof on your house, and you might talk to a few different professionals about it, but I would be surprised that you would come to me and say, I've chosen Acme Roof Company I don't trust them, but they're the best price. Right?
Right.
They don't,
Right.
that's
Right.
not congruent. They don't work
No.
together.
Yeah.
No.
You might say they're not the best price or the least price, but I trust them.
Mhm.
There's the difference.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? That's actually kind of really ties into what I would like to find out is why you decided 20 years ago to start your own franchise. That was not a small thing.
Yeah.
It was a huge risk.
Mm.
And Keller Williams was not known around here. So what allowed you to decide, this is the time, this is the need, and what was your vision when you started it? And maybe how it's changed since then even.
Okay, so if you look at the business model, it is a very high volume, low margin business model for a franchise owner.
Got it.
What I mean by that is there's very small amounts of profit per transaction. But if you do a large number of them, they add up.
Correct.
So if it's a very low margin of profit and the profits derived from the commissions earned, commissions aren't small.
Right.
Who's getting the commissions? It's the salespeople that work for the market center. They're highly compensated. So this was a highly compensated agent model. It was very agent centric, and meaning they received a ton of compensation per transaction. It was a capping model, which at the time was sort of revolutionary. You contributed a certain amount to the market center. After that, the rest was yours. So this appealed to me. But the biggest thing that appealed to me was I was coming from a company that had changed its culture.
Mm.
It was very much when I went to work for them, they hired me. They sort of recognized that I could maybe help them build their company. They hired me, and over about a 10-year period, that came true. But the company then sold itself to a large corporate entity, and that corporate entity is as large as it gets. Think of the largest automobile manufacturer in the world. Okay,
Got it. Yep.
in this country at the
Yes.
time. And so when I got promoted about 2 years before I left, I started to realize that the company was changing its culture to be not agent-centered, but really corporate-centric. And they were going to take some of the profits that the agents had been experiencing over the last few years away from them slowly but surely, but surely. And it really created a lot of anxiety for me, to the point where I started to look at other companies.
Mhm.
And it didn't take me long to come to KW. I had already purchased the book, The Millionaire Real Estate Agent, in 2003 when it was brand new. I bought it off the book, I bought it online because I'd heard an interview with Gary Keller and Dave
You were
Jenks.
top notch to order something online.
Well,
Right.
yeah,
To get
no,
there, right?
because it was considered a risk to part with your credit card information online back then. Holy cow, this isn't safe.
Just do it with a
The
tap.
net. Yeah.
Yeah. However, I got the book, read the book, and thought, my agents are not going to do this. They're not going to buy this book and implement all of this at the time. But I thought maybe if I give it to them little by little by little, they're gonna increase their productivity, and that's really what I was looking to do. But shortly after I could tell the corporation was going to move in a different direction, I said, got to look for a company. Didn't take me long. I did my due diligence with my partner Alan, and we opened up KW. It was just the two of us. We didn't talk to anybody at the old company. We didn't do that while we were employed there because it just seemed to be wrong.
Yeah.
If you're collecting a paycheck and trying to recruit out of a company you work for, just doesn't it speaks against everything you should
Right.
stand for, in my opinion. So that served to hurt us when we opened the doors because it was just the two of us. But it was a long
So
grind.
you quit your salaried position
Walked
completely.
away from about a $60,000 bonus that they did not pay. Went from being highly compensated to basically zero's the number, the new number.
Compensation.
And I'm going to tell you, when your salary is zero, I don't care how you budget. It's
still
it's a
zero.
challenge.
Yeah. Yeah.
So going through that, that was a huge risk. But what would you say probably are the biggest milestones in building this business and the challenges that maybe you didn't know that would be there, or things that you pleasantly were surprised about building a brand new business? Because this is the first time that you had bought into a business and started from scratch.
Well, so the first couple of weeks, people thought, "Oh my God, this is an awesome concept." To "Oh my God, I'm not going there." So it was just the two of us, and so it seemed to everybody on the outside, "Oh, they're going to fail. They're going to fail," and I would be absolutely fibbing if that didn't concern me. Because while I believed in everything about the company and in everything about our talents and in everything about our leadership style and what we stood for, it was still a very real risk that we weren't going to make it. Now, we capitalized ourselves well enough so that we could withstand a long period of time,
Yeah.
but we took no salaries. We worked our tails off. The turning point for us was as agents started joining slowly, and as we hired brand new agents, we were actually hiring brand new agents at a better clip than experienced agents because they saw the validity in the compensation model.
Yeah.
And then they also saw the validity in the picture that we painted, the vision for them.
Right.
And so slowly but surely, the company grew a little here and a little there to the point where it was this race towards validity. And once you reach some form of validity, if you keep chipping away at it, you only serve to become more valid.
Right.
Interesting.
And
Yeah.
so over a period of a few years, we went from having zero market share to being a regular player in all of the major markets in southern New Hampshire on our way to number one.
Yeah.
How long do you think that took?
We were about an 8-year overnight success.
I was
Proving the value.
Well, the reason I say that, and because it's so interesting, I came as a brand new agent 5 years after you opened.
Yeah.
I had no clue. Now, maybe if I had known it was only 5 years old, I really had no clue what I was looking for. So I came as a new agent. It made sense to me. That was when we were at Bedford Farms.
Sure.
But it was just interesting from a agent's perspective. You have no clue what
What is transpired?
you were struggling with on the back end, and it was probably, I'm wondering how many agents were here. Maybe 100? Maybe not even.
Possibly. I think we got to
Maybe
100
60.
about maybe 5 years in. It's
Okay.
possible it was 4 years in.
So I came in 09. So
Yeah.
that was
The getting to 100 was, I remember in the early days of opening the market center, that was the idea, is the race to get to 100, which was unheard of in one
maybe I was the
office.
100th. Maybe you never know. That'd be interesting. And I had no clue. I don't.
And I remember, there were people that believed in us more than in the early days because we were kind of a little bit beaten up after the first year.
Yeah.
Like, God, this is much harder than we thought. But think of it this way.
Yeah.
Isn't everything that you've ever done in your life,
The first time through is always going to.
you just go, man, this is harder than I thought it was.
Yeah.
Nobody says, oh my, even with all the talent that you might have, if the goal is big enough, it's always
Yeah.
harder than you thought. And by the way, worth it.
Right.
Worth it. Because I think to the benefit of real estate agents, whether they work with us or work somewhere else, you've benefited by us. And the reason I say that is others have been forced to add more education offerings in their offices. Others have been forced to change their compensation models to benefit the agents. I'm going to just say this: if we don't show up on the scene, agents aren't having a better go of it in this southern New Hampshire marketplace. They're not.
I agree. Taking that shift a little bit, because I know you love to study the market. And I'm guessing in 40 some years, you've seen a few market shifts. How many shifts do you think?
Well, I started in the midst of a shift because, in the early 1980s, the interest rate, the prime lending rate when I got into the business was 21.5%, prime lending. And so the mortgage rates at the time, FHA and VA mortgages were 16%, and the seller had to pay 4 to 6 discount points for the buyer to get the mortgage, meaning just think about that.
Wow.
Um, and that was the coin of the realm. That was the way business was. And so I didn't know any better at
Yeah.
my age. I had plenty of people whispering in my ear saying, real estate, do you see how high the mortgages are? Do you see how the economy, because the economy on top of inflation and the interest rates, the economy wasn't good. Now, where I'll go with all of this is every downturn in the market has been followed by a climb out of the market and really good days. The market's in constant change,
Yeah.
constant, very, very limited amounts of time has the market been static, where you go, this is the way it's going to be for the next couple of years. It's generally, the market's good if you're a seller right now, and challenging if you're a buyer, not because you might be fine with the mortgage rates where they are, but you can't find a home very easily unless you've got a really well-educated realtor representing you. So every downturn is nothing to be concerned about, and every upturn is just a matter of time before more real estate agents get into the business. And so there's always this equilibrium that follows good times and bad times. When times are bad, agents get out. And so I always say, this is a skill-based market and it's a professionals market. When times are good, I feel like that's good for everybody. But when times are bad, that's good for those that are going to be in the business for the long term.
Well, it's interesting because people said the same thing to me when I got in, because I got in 2009. The market had crashed.
Yeah.
And I remember they're like, why would you? People were leaving. I mean, it was short sales and foreclosures were most of the market right then.
Sure.
And they said, why? And I feel like it was probably the best gift I could give myself. Probably the same with you, because when you learn how to do it hard, you have to be skill-based. You have to learn. And I think the last few years, it was such fast pace that I feel like we lost out on that slowing down and that skill base that I think we're going to have to kind of go back
Think
to.
about some of the short sales. The short sales, you get a buyer client of yours, find them a home that was a short sale. It might from the time you went under contract to the time you closed could be 5 or 6 months.
Mine was 9 months.
Yeah.
I bought my own home, short sale. It was
Yeah.
a 9-month process, just like all my pregnancies.
Yeah.
It's probably more
I was
painful.
gonna say equally painful or more. Yeah.
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 I mean, from when we saw it, not under contract.
Sure.
But it was a 9-month process.
Yeah.
I did that only 7 years ago. Still, it wasn't well known, but that
Yeah.
you sure learn a lot really quickly. And I feel like we're walking into a market, and this is just my opinion, I'd like to know yours, that's just going to become more of a reality, and agents are going to have to learn to be creative and figure out things they've never done before, even if they've been in the business for 10 years. A lot of people have never done a foreclosure or a short sale, and that's going to have to happen at some point.
Or negotiated a home inspection.
So true.
What I think is that the markets change rapidly, and so where we are today is that we are still in an inventory challenging market. So it's very opportunistic for property owners that are looking to sell. If they've bought in the last few years, they have equity, providing they haven't refinanced themselves into a precarious position. So it's very easy to sell a property. There are parts of the country that have shifted from where we are today to 4, 5, 6, 7 months worth of inventory. And so a colleague friend of mine in Florida rather said, be careful what you wish for, because it can happen that quickly. So my feeling is that you learn the skills as fast as you need to learn them in this market, because everything I know about short sales, I've forgotten.
So true.
So if a short sale environment came back, I would be a quick study. I know that about myself, and those that are in the business, you just got to know that about yourself too. You're going to learn what you need to know.
Yes.
It's just creating survivalist skills at the time you need them, on demand.
Adapt or die.
And if you're here, but trust me,
Yeah.
we're going to make sure you possess all of the arrows in your quiver in order to win.
You know what? As you say that, it got me back to our lovely changes this summer with our the settlement.
Sure.
You, in particular, had a lot of foresight into that, and I think it was about a year and a half before, at least a year, we started talking about buyer agency, and that's exactly what the gift of having a leadership that's really agent centric and observing and fully immersed. You help run a team as well, so you see it on a daily basis. Um, we're never going to be able to predict the future, but there are signs, and you run the stats and numbers. We can see things.
Patterns.
We see the patterns. Numbers don't lie.
Well, I think it's important to know this. It's success through others,
Yes.
and with others. And the only way that happens in a compensation model that we've got designed here at KW is you have to have agents that succeed at high levels. Because if they do enough transactions, the small numbers per smaller margins pay off over time. And that only happens if you get people on the curve, ahead of the curve,
Yeah.
that are ready when the changes come. Anticipating the changes is never easy because sometimes you're wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
So, but I think we were fortunate because our buyer agency skills are pretty good here.
Yeah. Let's shift topics a little bit, but not really, about our culture and our leadership. You brought it up a little bit when you decided to take a Keller Williams model and buy a franchise. Culture and it being agent centric was right at the front of the reasons you chose Keller Williams as the franchise. What does that look like today? How do you foster it on a daily basis in the office? And why do you think that's so important?
I think it's important because most people recognize what good and bad culture is
Mhm.
when they see it in other businesses or even in places where they've worked in the past.
Mm.
If you have a place where you look back at your employers lovingly, or you look back at your employers like regretfully, where you say, I wasn't treated very well. And so that culture happens at the very highest level first, but then if you've got the right leaders, everything rises and falls on leadership. So if you have the right leaders guiding in the early stages, here's what happens. Culture happens across all levels. Because if you're just sort of saying, this is what we want it to be, and we put that in writing on the wall.
Which we
Yeah,
do here.
we do, but that isn't
That's
that
not
is
culture.
that isn't culture.
No.
That's wall art.
Yeah.
You've got to kind of live it and demonstrate it. People, I think, find it here because they can see it in a palpable way almost from the very beginning. I also believe this, because we are a profit sharing organization. I think when people succeed, everybody succeeds. The market center succeeds. Agents that help to grow other agents that might have a stake in recruiting them into the company succeed. When everybody succeeds together, they all have stake in the game, right? And that isn't the case in the industry. The industry is like, darn, they got that piece of business. Why didn't I get that piece of
Right.
business? And if you allow that to kind of foster and grow in a market center or in an office, it isn't long before that becomes the prevailing wisdom and prevailing wind. You gain, I lose. And the first thing we say is win, win, or no deal. And so that means this: you win, I win. Your gain is a potential gain for me also. And so you got to look at it that way. You got to live it that way. You got to act it that way. And it does get pretty easy I think the blessing, it's a really good question, Mary Hope. I think the blessing is this: when you start an organization, you get to hold true to what you conceive right from the beginning. as opposed to coming in and having to take over and
And
change
change the
a
culture.
culture.
That's
Yeah.
Right.
interesting.
So we've got a culture that has not needed to be
Right.
changed for 20 years.
Right.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that we
Tone.
can't continually work on it. It doesn't mean that it can't continually get more perfect, but it's pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, I remember when Mark first proposed that he wanted me to possibly take over this new role, and I said no, because I observed, and this was from an agent's perspective, what big shoes to fill, because he lived that every day, that culture, and the leadership did, and I knew on the same token, my job was going to be so much easier because of the culture. I haven't had to change anything.
Mhm.
You know, I have been able to walk into a culture that I'm not having to change, which is a big deal. And that's a very interesting perspective, that when you can start it from scratch, you don't have bad habits to
Yeah,
fix
weed
or
out.
change or get rid of people and all of that,
Yeah. Well, I mean, the core values that are on the wall here, and I mean, I know they're on the wall, right? But the fact that the core values exist at the core of the culture here, as flawed as other little things might be, those are easily improvable if the core is stable.
Sure.
And the core is so stable here. I mean, I talked about it before, and I hope, but like, as soon as I walked in the door here, you could feel the difference. And to me, I'm very much a feeler. And, it's a hard thing to kind of, describe and put your finger on, but, the quality of character of the people in the halls of this building, you don't see it in many places, period. Not just real estate. It's very hard to create a culture. And the fact that you've created one and sustained it for 20 years now, I mean, it's super impressive. And I think more importantly, it's inspiring to the agents who are a part of it. Yeah.
Well, I'm reminded of a story of Tom Watson, the founder of IBM, the original of Tom Watson, and was asked about the unbelievable success of the corporation, and he said, "Well, we owe it to three distinct things. Number one is we tried to get a clear vision of what a company would like IBM is today would look like when it was done, and so we had that in our mind, and then we said, if a company looks like that, how would it have to act? And so we decided to define what the actions of the company would look like on a day-to-day basis. And then the third was that we realized if we didn't look that way and act that way from the very beginning, we would never get there.
Yeah.
And so looking and acting from the very beginning is a blessing.
Yeah.
It felt like a heavy lift, but it's ultimately a bigger blessing because you get to choose.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. I love that. Now, we're celebrating 20 years of this market center, this franchise. What is your vision for the next 5 to 10 years? Where do you see this going? Where do you see the industry going? Where do you see the opportunities
And the challenges.
and the challenges?
Yeah.
Well, the challenge is hubris. It's the sort of the mentality that you go, we're there, we don't need to change anything. And there's no and looking at every new idea that comes your way as something that is not necessary. So I believe you've got to be open to the changes that are going to come into the industry over the next 5 to 10 years. I also believe that, I've said this before, but I'm 63 years old. One of my partners is about to be 73 this year, and the other is going to be 53 this year. And so in 10 more years, if we're all still alive, which let's hope that we are, we'll be 83, 73, and 63. And so while that's very good, because you have a lot of institutional knowledge, I do believe that you lose validity as you get along in your life because you don't have the same energy levels. Just let's call it that. And so I believe that the company, in order for it to grow, is going to need the next generation of leadership. So this generation has got to look towards the next generation with open arms, as opposed to saying, "Well, I'm not sure. I'll wait until I'm no longer here for somebody else to decide." Companies dissipate over time if they don't plan for a succession.
Well, I think on that same conversation with the culture, if you don't plan you can lose that really quickly if those who have set that tone, if they don't train and build up the next leaders. I know John Maxwell says being a leader is training others to be a leader. And I know I didn't say that the right way, and I'm
Yeah, yeah.
sure Bill has
No,
it memorized.
no, but you're
But
right.
that's where, and that's actually it's another quality of Keller Williams that we train people to be leaders. We have an agent leadership council for that very reason because we do have some
Yep.
amazing people in our company that they just need an opportunity to lead. And so that's a neat way to see it, and there's a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I've said it before too. I think it's kind of a unique setup because after having been here for a couple of years, I don't just see it as like a brokerage anymore. I see it as an incubator for business owners,
Mm.
for entrepreneurs, because I think the values that are so dominant here in this building are kind of like the best version of what you get out of the Keller Williams playbook, of sort of like this is where entrepreneurs thrive, and you say, here's all the things you need to know, and it's up to you to go and take them and put them into effect. And yeah, it might be painful to do it, but look at the benefit.
The people that come here from other organizations, they come here because they have this desire. If they've got experience somewhere else, they come here because this is a place that they want to build a very big business.
Mm.
And when you say entrepreneurs thrive, we provide all of the necessary sort of environment and ecosystem for that to happen.
Yeah.
And it isn't just compensation; it's all of the things around that. Because if you only provide one thing,
Yeah.
like for instance, to live on this planet, oxygen isn't the only. It's very valuable,
Right.
but it isn't the only component.
Mm-hmm.
And so compensation might be important here for some people,
Yeah.
but it's not the only thing.
Yeah.
And so we provide all of the things that allow you to make a really good choice by being here, staying here, coming here, and then running a big business.
Yeah.
We're partners with them.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I as you were saying that, giving that opportunity to have big businesses, I'm thinking just even at this table, you also not only are you an operating partner, but you help run a big team.
Yep.
Same thing for me.
Yep.
I was able to step out of my business and I have a big team that's running my business. There's not many models that either of us could be doing our job while running a whole nother
And
business.
to be really fair, in your case and in my case, we've got people that have taken over the role that
Yes.
we used to have. So in other words, we're not dabbling in one and the other.
Correct.
We're leading the organization. I can't tell you the last time I went on a listing appointment.
Right.
It's been well over a year, maybe 2, maybe more.
But the system that you have and created in your team and the way that
Couldn't exist elsewhere.
Yeah.
Could not.
couldn't.
It just it is not allowable in other companies.
Okay, I was going to ask you your
Ask me one.
one
You can edit
one piece of advice for a brand new agent.
one piece of advice for a brand
If
new
you
agent.
if someone was walking in your door and they haven't sold one piece of real estate.
So if I were a brand new agent, here's what I would do. I would first of all recognize that the most important thing I think for a new agent to succeed in real estate is you got to have the ability to last. And so the ability to last means this: stick with it. Now, some people will say, easy for you to say, but we've got bills to pay. Okay. So what's important to you? Paying the bills, and in some cases you might have another job. How hard are you willing to work for your dream?
Mm.
And so even if you get into this business full time, how hard are you willing to work for your dream? And if that's the case, it comes down to this: you got to be willing to engage in relationships with people you know, and with people you don't know. And by talking to enough people, you start to build upon itself. And it starts slowly. In some cases, you might feel like this is really great. It's happening fast. A big career doesn't happen in your first year. It might be a great first year. We have rookies of the year that do unbelievable amounts of business, and yet they can't retire on the first year's production,
Right.
no matter how good it is. So it really means this: you've got to build a great career over time. And the ability to last cannot be overshadowed. I've seen so many successful people make six figures in the business in the first year, and then they're nowhere to be found after 5 years. So you've got to be able to put in place a business that continues to work for you. You've got to have systems. We'll teach them to you. You've got to have technology. We've got it for you. And then on top of that, you've got to have some form of leverage, which is usually people. Building a team will teach you that also.
That's wonderful.
Well,
Thank
that's a
you.
great note to end on. Thank you, Bill,
All
for
right.
taking the chance 20 years ago.
Yep.
you.
Sticking with it.
Appreciate it.
Well, my pleasure.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Behind the Sign, Real Stories from Real Estate.
We hope you enjoyed today's conversation and gained a little insight into the world behind those for sale signs.
Today's episode was brought to you by Keller Williams Realty Metropolitan, proudly serving New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine, and Massachusetts. A special thank you to our agents, leadership, and partners at KW Metro for their continued support.
And thanks to you, our amazing listeners and viewers. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.
Leave us a review or comment. We love hearing your feedback, and it helps more people discover the show.
And if you have a real estate story you'd like to share or a question you want answered on a future episode, reach out to us at metro.kw.com or find us on Instagram, handle at KWMetroNH.
Until next time, we'll see you
Behind the sign.